Hello, everyone. Happy Thursday. This is Coach Sarah live on our Complete Performance Coaching page. I'm excited to be here with you today. We are talking about back to school blues. So if anyone's here, hello. Thanks for joining us live. And if you're watching the replay, that's great too. So before we get started, again, I'm Coach Sarah. I am one of the I think there's 5 of us, 5 coaches for Complete Performance Coaching. We do some online mental toughness training in our Perform Happy community, and then we also do one-on-one coaching for athletes to help get them more mentally tough and more mentally prepared for sport. And I had a parent ask me just the other day, what is going on with my child now that we're back in school? She's moody, she doesn't want to go to practice, and she's stressing because season is around the corner. Just a couple weeks ago, she was totally fine. What is going on? So I'm going to try and tackle that question today with some advice to maybe help your child and you out as we tackle some of these back to school blues. Now, here we are right after Labor Day. Some kids have just gone back. My son and his school district have been back in school for 3 weeks already. I know everyone starts at a different time, but chances are your child is just getting started or they're still in sort of the early stages of getting back into school after that summer break. And the start of a new school year can present challenges for any kid because they're just transitioning out of that summer mode, but especially for our athletes. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So as you get back into school, this is a big transition time. They are coming off of that summer break where they didn't have school, they didn't have homework, they just had more time, right? One part of their lives was just so much easier to manage because they didn't have to worry about it. They didn't have school. They didn't have homework. They didn't have that extra level of stress. So summer is so nice. Sorry about that. Someone called in the middle of my live. That's never happened before. We don't have to, shuffle them between school and then sport. And it's just a much more relaxed time for typically most of the time for most of us. And so now they're thrown back into school. And there's this extra part of life that they have to manage. And so it's really normal that there can be this transition time for kids as we get back into school. And I think it's hard for parents because we feel like, well, you've done this before. You go back to school every year. It's fine. Let's just get going. And that's not always the case. It's not always that easy to get used to that transition. And then it becomes stressful for parents. It becomes stressful for kids. And really, they're just out of the habit. So there's a few things that we can do for our kids and with our kids to ultimately help with this transition back into school and to beat some of those back to school blues. So first of all, tip number 1, remember that there are transitions happening. Again, I think it's just so easy to feel like, well, we do this every year. We go back to school. Summer wasn't that long. But it's a transition for them. And so they're transitioning both out of summer and back into school, but also after school gets out, like literally at the end of their day, there's this transition that's happening. And it's very normal for kids, really of any age, to become sort of irritable and moody right after school, complaining that they're tired because guess what? They've been in school all day. They've been focusing. They've been keeping it together. They've been regulating their emotions and they've been really working hard to focus. So it's very normal that when they are done with school for the day, there's going to be a bit of time that they're sort of transitioning out of that and they can kind of relax a little bit, which is great. But sometimes that comes across as they're moodier than usual or, they're just whiny, they're extra tired and it doesn't quite make sense. But again, that's very normal at the end of a school day as your child transitions out of that. So just sort of give them this space and the time to decompress after school and really be careful of rushing them directly into homework and studying, even though they probably have practice really soon, right? And you need to maximize that time in between school and practice. Just know you might be fighting a really tough battle because that time right after school might be a bit of a challenge for them. Now, as the school year progresses, they're probably going to get more used to kind of this after school time. You won't notice that tough transition as much, but just be aware, especially as we get back into school, there's a lot of just sort of regulating that happens during the school day and they're not as good at it when they come home. And this is true of any age. So tip number 2 to help deal with these back to school blues is to remind your kids about the mental skills that they have been learning with us. Part of why I love working with youth and teenage athletes is because the mental skills that we teach for sport are life skills too. And so as they are going through maybe some of these challenges in school, like, oh, I'm tired. Well, how do you pick your energy up when you're at practice? Or I'm getting really nervous for my test. Well, how do you get yourself to deal with those nerves for competition? Remind your athletes that they have mental skills. They are developing their mental toughness, and it's not just for sport, it's for life too. So really talk about, some of the stress that can come up as school is going on. And I know for some schools, especially our younger kids, the beginning of the year maybe isn't super stressful, but there's still times that they can use these mental skills. If they're still getting nervous when they go into the room with their new teacher, or they don't know everyone yet, take a nice deep breath to calm yourself down. Give yourself a nice positive thought to keep you going. So encourage them to use these mental skills and also be really explicit that, school and life are perfect times to be using the mental skills that you're learning with your mental toughness coaches. And the more your athletes use these skills in school, in life, the better they become in sport. So for your athletes who are really sort of motivated and focused by what's going on in their sporting world, that's a great way to encourage them to keep using these mental skills, because they might be more inclined to use them in school and in life and feel their benefits if they start to understand that that actually helps them out when they're back in sport. Third tip to deal with some of these back to school blues as we all transition our athletes back into school along with sport. Make sure they're having fun. When summer ends and you're back to the grind of sort of normal life, it's really easy to drop things like going to the movies, right? Because you just don't have as much time, or letting them have a slightly later night out because they didn't have school the next day. So you end up, without meaning to, dropping all of these things, maybe not all, but dropping a lot of the things that were really fun in the summer because summer's over. But the truth is, if our kids don't continue to have fun outside of school and outside of sport, then the other areas of life, like school and sport, start to become less fun and start to suffer. So even though your time is going to be tighter now and there's just more on your schedule, be sure to make sure that you've got these fun activities and that your kids have something to look forward to. Maybe it can't be movies every week, but maybe it's, the last weekend of the month. We're going to make sure that we have time to go to the movies. Or if your kids are of an age they don't really want to spend that much time with you right now, then you can be sure to plan something on the schedule where they've got a good block of time that they can hang out with their friends. You just want to make sure they don't become overly scheduled. And so this can happen sometimes too as we transition out of summer. It's like, well, I was having this, weekly movie date with my friends, and then I did this with this friend on the weekend. And if you take too many of those summer activities over into the school year, something will suffer. So there's probably not a thing as too much fun, but there's definitely a thing as too many activities, even if those activities are all really exciting and really awesome. Related to that, my fourth tip to help, and this is for everyone with your back to school blues, is to talk about priorities as a family. And I'd say this is especially true for your high schoolers. Elementary school parents, this is just good for you to mentally check in on. Middle school, junior high families, you might want to have these conversations with your kids. But it's important to prioritize what is important to us as a family, because there will come a time when there just are not enough hours in the day, and something is going to have to give. And oftentimes for our high schoolers, they cut back on sleep, right? If you've got a high schooler, you've probably seen those times where there's too many tests, there's too many papers, they're in the height of season, so they're going to practice. And of course they care about school, so they just stay up really late. And then they're fried the next day, or they do that for a few days, and then they're running on empty. And that's not good. So you want to, I'd say, proactively discuss, well, what's most important to us? Is it school? Is it sport? Is it your overall well-being, including sleep? I would say that third one is probably most important. That's my vote. And discuss as a family, again, proactively, what do you do when you get overwhelmed? Because again, this is going to happen, especially for our high school athletes. They are going to get overwhelmed. They're going to have lots of homework. They're going to have projects. They're going to be preparing for SATs and AP tests and all of that. So decide proactively as a family, how are you going to deal when this happens so that fights don't occur? because your athlete may be very motivated in school and they might actually get upset if you say, you know what, I think it's time to go to bed. You've done enough, right? They might say, well, no, I need to study because I have this test tomorrow. But you know, if you don't get enough sleep, you can't do as good as you want to on the test. So this is kind of a tip for now as school is getting up and running that will hopefully prepare you for those more overwhelming moments. But again, have this plan. So maybe you decide as a family that when you get to these overwhelming times, your athlete is going to skip one practice to catch up. So school is a little bit more of the priority in sport in that situation, and overall well-being and balance is really at the top. So maybe as a family, we decide you skip one practice, you really stay focused on getting caught up in school. Perhaps you do some imagery to help make up for that missed practice time. And then you go to sleep on time and you're prepared for everything. Or maybe if sport is more of the priority because you have a big meet coming up, perhaps your athlete forgoes a night of schoolwork in favor of sleep, and you talk with your teacher to perhaps get some extra time. So again, if you are doing these proactively, if this is a high schooler, I'd say have your high schooler do this. Talk to the teachers and say, you know what, a month from now, I've got a really big point in my season coming up. I've got nationals, and I noticed on the syllabus, this is also when there's a lot of work due. Is there any way that I could, get an extension, or can I turn it in early? So be talking with the teachers proactively about maybe balancing out that workload if it really matches up with your athlete's sports schedule, which a lot of times it does, right? Because when it rains, it pours. And of course, there would be a huge meet, a huge paper, a huge test, a driving test, a dance, and all these things all happening at the same time, because that's what happens. So again, that fourth tip to deal with sort of these back to school blues and what can happen as school ramps up is to go over priorities as a family and decide what you'll do so that you don't have any of those fights. And then my last tip for today, my fifth tip, is to talk to your kids about how they're feeling about everything. Let them know it's really normal as school gets started to kind of feel overwhelmed again, or feel stressed, or, be bummed that you have to go to school again, that all that is really normal. And to remind them that, you know what, you will get back into the groove. It happens, right? There's these natural transition times. And I would encourage you to ask your child what you can do to help ease that transition and how you can help them get back into the routine. Because I think sometimes as parents, we forget that we did things that made it easier at the beginning of the year, like getting their lunches ready, or, helping them manage time a little bit more. Because, we sort of remember the end of the year where they were putting their lunch together on their own, and they got their books and they got to school on time. We sort of forget way back in August or September when they couldn't remember which classes they had each day, and they couldn't quite remember, which book they needed, and getting their lunch. So even though our kids are getting older and they can take on more responsibilities and they can do more, in the beginning of the year, to kind of deal with these back to school blues and this challenging transition, is to do a little bit more hand holding with them. Even though as parents, I think, it's nice. It's like, oh, they get their lunches ready. But guess what? If they're feeling kind of that overwhelm of everything happening again new at the beginning of the year, it might be nice to help them with their lunch, or ask, hey, do you want me to help you get your lunch ready for the first couple weeks of school? And typically, as the year progresses, they're going to get back into the groove. They can take on more of those things on their own. So 5 tips to help you and your kids deal with this back to school transition. Again, it's a challenging time for everybody. And if you can help your kids lower their stress level, ease into that transition a little bit more, it's going to be better for us as parents, right? I think it goes both ways. When we're feeling more relaxed and happy and calm, they are too. And when they feel that way, so do we. So it all sort of, everything affects everything when it comes to a family. Those dynamics are always in play. So know that this transition time is very normal. It's usually temporary, right? As everyone kind of gets back into the groove and into the routine. And so take the time now to figure out how can we as parents help our athletes so that they can ultimately succeed as they get back into the swing of things. So hopefully these tips have been helpful. If you need any more support from us, you can check us out. We've got coaching one-on-one for mental skills for your athletes, and you can check out and perhaps join our Perform Happy community, where we've got online mental toughness training led by Coach Rebecca. She's got live sessions every week, and an online forum where our athletes get lots of support. And for any of our athletes watching, make sure you're using all of your mental skills, not only in sport, but in school and in life. Thank you for joining, and we'll see you next time.